Okay. Well, I don't know about you guys, but my watch is saying 4 o'clock.
Bang
And
on.
that's the time we said the webinar's going to start. And I want to respect everyone's time because I go to a lot of events and they go, right, going to leave it a couple more minutes, let some more people come in. No, we said it's going to start at 4 p.m. GMT. That's the time it's going to start. And that is the time now. So I want to thank everyone for joining our webinar, which is all about Exhibitor ROI. And this one has got a sprinkling of diamonds, a bit of De Beers for you on a Wednesday afternoon, if you're in the UK. And our Exhibitor ROI is all about finding diamonds in your data. So what are those little tidbits, little insights that you can get maybe from your event platform that could help you go to exhibitors and get them to rebook again? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want people to come back to our show because it shows that our shows are growing and they're not declining, and things are going up and to the right. Now, obviously, in 1953, a long time ago, that was like a year after my dad was born, Marilyn Monroe sung a very famous song, which is Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. But today we know that event organizers are starting to understand the importance of diamonds and the diamonds that they find in their data. So they can showcase to exhibitors that they are doing some great things. They can ensure that they can see the ROI from their show, and they can easily rebook them, whether that is before the show, maybe they're rebooking them while the show is happening, maybe they are rebooking them after the show as well. And what's interesting is we've got two brilliant speakers on with us today. We've got Leah Freeland, and she's going to talk a bit about herself and what she's doing. And she is from a company called Rego, and I'll let her talk about what Rego does. We've got the amazing Denzel Rankin as well from Stacks, and he's going to talk a bit about himself and what he does. So I think, first of all, let's go to Denzel. Denzel, tell us a bit about you, your background, Stacks, and then we'll go across to Leah and give a bit of an overview of what she's doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Happy to do that. Yes, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Denzel Rankin, and yeah, the firm I'm with is Stacks. But I actually founded a different firm a very long time ago. I'm not sure I'm going to admit how long ago, called AMR. And we really specialized in helping people understand which countries and which markets they should be in. And I ended up working a lot in the trade show industry. So worked with, I think, 16 or 17 of the top 20 trade show organizers globally. Worked also with a lot of venues, service providers, and so on. I've actually been to 35 different countries, helping with the globalization of the trade show industry. I'm in London now. I've also lived in New York. And then a year ago, we became the London office of Stacks, which is a phenomenal firm. They're just bigger and more grown up than what we were doing at AMR. And I guess the thing that I'm just passionate about is not only just the events industry, but how you can do things better in a more sort of modern way in the events industry, moving beyond just renting a hall and getting a bunch of people in there to see what happens. So this is why this topic's really of interest to me. So I could rabbit on for hours, but I think you're not here to hear about that. So hand it back to you. You can crack on.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Denzel. That's excellent. I'm glad we're in safe hands when it comes to data and insights. And now moving over to Leah, tell us a bit about you. Tell us where you are in the world at the moment and what you're actually doing, because I find that fascinating.
Yes, so good evening from me. It's 8 o'clock here from Abu Dhabi. So I apologise for the lighting, and I'm in my hotel room, having been at a very busy exhibition today, certainly from what I do. So if I explain a bit, that I am a business manager at Rego, and I am responsible for a portfolio of exhibition organisers. And I offer consultation and practical support, along with a vast freelance staff who are experts in sales and exhibitions and rebooking, to strategize and strengthen their rebook approach, including pre-show and post-show sales. And that's why it's so excellent to be on this webinar today, because a massive part of what I have to do is getting exhibitors to buy in to the show. The shows don't exist without them. So why on earth would they want to come back? And we have to be able to evidence that. So it's really interesting to be talking today on that.
Amazing. So you're saying you're actually at a show at the moment and you're rebooking exhibitors. Can you talk about what that show is? And I went to a big conference the other day and I got a first hand for it. And there was just like these big maps on the wall, and they were looking at how many exhibitors they were rebooking in real time, and they had the percentages, and they had 3 shows co-located, and it was real buzzy, and there were all these salespeople running around and ticking off the exhibitors on the maps. I was like, this is incredible. It was very exciting.
Well, that's great to hear that you appreciate that approach, because there's many different approaches and strategies to rebook. So part of what I do with our freelancers is to helicopter in and quite often work with sales teams, core sales teams that I've never met before. And at the show that I'm at currently, UMEX in Abu Dhabi, unmanned systems in relation to military, kind of forefront of drones and those kind of concepts, unmanned systems. I'm going in and there is that map on the wall because it's used to create a buzz and certainly to make exhibitors think, crikey, this is, a really exciting show. Other exhibitors are coming back. Is my competition coming back? Do I need to come back? And that's what that buzz is around. And we certainly use the sales stand and the exhibitor lounge to do that. So we are a point of engagement between the core sales team and the exhibitor, really pointing out and highlighting the USP of the show, the marketing aspects of the show, and why they should be coming back. And the map you mentioned is a massive part of that.
Well, congrats, and thank you very much for joining us so late in the day when your team's probably out celebrating, booking everyone, and you're sat in a hotel room at 8 p.m. at night joining us for this webinar. So thank you. Right, before we get into the kind of main part of this webinar, it's probably worth me just explaining who I am. This is the most boring part. I'm Hugh. I'm the SVP of marketing at Grip. Joined Grip about 2 years ago because I honestly believe that when you make connections, particularly in person, in your personal life or your business life, amazing things happen. And Grip is a real manifestation of that with the software that we create to ensure that business relationships actually happen at these events. We make them happen through the organizers who are our customers, people like South by Southwest, Money 2020, Clarion. We got some fantastic partners that we work with on all of those shows. And a big part of that is exhibitors. So I'd like to first move over to Denzel and ask you about exhibitors. Why are they so important? Are they important? Tell us about Exhibitor ROI and why that should be something we as organizers should be focused on.
Yeah, happy to jump in with my opinion of that. And the first thing I'm going to say to you is I think you might be looking through the wrong end of the telescope because you're talking about Exhibitor ROI. And yeah, we kind of know that's the holy grail. But actually, what really matters are the visitors, or in American, the attendees. And I think we're looking here at an outcome, and you've got to really make sure you understand the input to get there. Because if we don't have the visitors and we don't have the right people, there is going to be no show whatsoever. And I just find it sometimes frustrating when people just only think about exhibitors, whereas in fact, you have to be an attendee-focused business. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to run our CEO think tank, which is off the radar because we don't publicize it. We've got 20 CEOs there from the global industry. It's in New York. And one of the premise we're going to put there is that actually you just need to be an audience business. And an audience is like a media word. Or you could say you need to be a data business, or you actually have to have first-party data, meaning you have an attendee base, database that really captures the universe. And we know that databases can turn over very fast. It may be after a couple of years, 50% is going to be out of date. So not only have you got to be up to date with it, you then got to make sure you're allowed to speak to them, depending upon which country you're in, and they want to speak to you. And so this entire game is about visitors. So look, I just apologize to the people listening for whom it's screamingly obvious, but because you started with the word exhibitor, you've touched you touched a nerve. And I'm saying exhibitor ROI is all about the visitor, and therefore we have to have the right visitor database. We've got to understand the universe. We have to have that universe. We need to engage with them. We need to understand what they're interested in. Ideally, we want to know their inside leg measurements. And I guess that means that it's going to be very easy for you when you're able to say, we had exactly the right visitors, whether it's purchasing power or whatever it is that's needed. And guess what? They came to your booth, and guess what? You had a good conversation with them, and you're coming back next year for a bigger booth and spending more, aren't you? It all sounds very simple, but this whole understanding of how to approach visitors, unfortunately, sometimes is just skated over.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I completely agree. It's this chicken and egg thing. You need the right visitors, attendees to be able to attract the right exhibitors, because they want to meet with probably the most valuable people in the value chain, which is the attendees and the visitors. But would you say, Denzel, before moving over to Leah, would you say that, a lot of this is you've got to have both, and it's got to be a bit of a balance. You've got to have the right visitors and attendees, but then obviously you need to start looking at exhibitors. And I think the core thing that I'm seeing throughout your argument is data, because you need that data to prove what's really going on both sides of that equation.
Yeah, look, to take your first point, I must admit, sometimes I go to an extreme, and when I'm speaking to colleagues, sometimes a bit less experienced, who are looking at events and so on, I would say, if I was to get the right attendees on the moon, the exhibitors would go. And you see that in the way the best events are structured. So I'm sorry, I'm adamant about it's going to be incredibly easy to sell to an exhibitor if you say the right people are there. So that's just the way it was. And what was your second question? I've forgotten now.
Well, data, really, at the end of the day. So
data.
Let's have a hypothesis. Let's agree that you've got the right. Everyone on this webinar right now has got the right visitors and attendees. They've absolutely nailed it.
I bet they haven't. I
let's
bet you that's not true. They will not have, because what is your universe? If your universe is 100, i.e. everyone who could be a potentially attractive visitor, I bet you no one on this webinar has 100% of that universe. And then how many of those are you actually engaged with and do you have permission to engage with? That's way below 100. So I'm sorry, I'm going to challenge you. So that's the big thing to get right first. And to do that, you have to be a data business, and you have to worry about your audience data more than anything else. So I'll give you a little anecdote. Two former colleagues meet, both worked with a great big group, knew each other, known each other for years, and talk about their businesses in different parts of the world. And after they chat a bit, one says to the other, "Oh, your business is doing really well. How many square meters do you have?" And the other guy says, "I don't actually know. I don't know how many square meters I've got, but I can tell you what my visitor database is, and I can go and find out the square meters, because actually that just follows." And it doesn't measure the square meters, measures quality of audience, penetration of audience, level of engagement, all those digital metrics that you would see in a digital media business being used in an events business.
Yeah, I completely see where you're coming from. And, I think there's always work to be done on visitors. But let's say that, you've done quite well. I'm not saying that everyone on this webinar has nailed it, but you're doing all right. So, Leah, what's the next step then when it comes to, you've got a pretty good audience, you're doing all right, you probably want to monetize that audience by getting the right exhibitors in to complement that audience and to be able to sell to them. What are some of the challenges that organizers, these large conference, trade show, Confex organizers, what are some of the challenges they're facing when it comes to their exhibitors, when it comes to, rebooking them, when it comes to making sure that, you've got the right things that they need to be able to see that they've got some value out of your show?
I mean, I'm exceedingly pleased that Denzel is not one of my exhibitors, because I can imagine the metrics that you would be asking me to prove with beads of sweat. And that's, quite right too. We are are having to prove our worth, and we are having to prove why exhibitions are valuable, and the exhibitors want to know who is in the room. So I agree with what you're saying, and certainly from what you're doing, Denzel, I come back to your advice that you were giving people in relation to which countries they should be in and which markets they should be in. And certainly that's part of my role within rebooking. Exhibitors want to know, well, who should I be speaking to? When should I be speaking to them? But part of that process and part of that journey is actually getting exhibitors to buy in to the tech and buy into the platforms that are used and buy into the data and start using it for themselves. Data is only as good as the data you input, for instance. So, if I have a 10,000 visitor show, does that matter to me if that 99% of those people aren't relevant to me, don't have the purchasing power? So it is very much down to attendees. Denzel, I absolutely agree with you, but it's about what you get out of that data and really making it a value proposition for the exhibitors, that they're in the right place, the right time, and they have access to those people.
So could you give us some examples then, Leah, of real life organizers where maybe it's gone well, where you've used the data, maybe it's not gone so well, because you can imagine sometimes some of the data will hold a mirror up to bad events where you're like, well, the data doesn't actually show that your event's working very well. Or maybe, you're one of these ecosystem events that's so massive that people are just willing to rebook straight away, and you may not even need to give them any data. Or do we always need to be giving them data? If you can give us some kind of real life examples, you don't have to name names of organizers where it's going well, where it's not going well, that would be really helpful.
Oh, I can give you some examples for sure. So one of the best shows that I know that use data at the earliest opportunity, because it's not just about at show data, it's about giving exhibitors as much time and as much lead up as they can to have that balance of serendipity and certainty. Okay, so yes, that attendee information is so powerful, because if I know who's coming to the show, I can interrogate that data, book in those meetings, and to some sense of hope that I will be getting the business done at the show that I need to get done. So Essentials Money 2020 use that cycle very, very effectively, and they certainly have a huge networking program where there's a matchmaking process, so AI comes into it in terms of the data that's inputted, purchasing power, level of seniority, products and services that are interested. So it's coming from both angles, and there's kind of both parties, attendees, visitors, delegates, and the exhibitors are making the most of their attendance at the show.
That's great. I mean, I love real life examples. I think we've got one from Grip as well, ITC Vegas. We've got the data inside Grip. We've got this new product called Pulse, which is like, real time insights for helping you to rebook your exhibitors. So ITC Vegas shows us in the data, we can show them real time who exhibitors are actually connecting with, who are they meeting, which sales teams for which exhibitors, and actually which salesperson are having the right meetings, which aren't booking enough meetings, which are having the quality meetings. What are the benchmarks for other events like ITC Vegas that they could be kind of looking to better when it comes to rebooking their exhibitors?
You've made
this is really great. Can I jump in with a question for you, Leah?
Yeah.
I mean, listening to you, Hugh, with that example and your Money 2020 example, fantastic. How many times, Leah, do you come across cases whereby some of that data and some of those processes are in place, but it's just too hard for the organizer to use them, or their people aren't used to it, and therefore they're failing to exploit the opportunity?
Organizers are getting better in terms of giving exhibitors orientations on platforms and how to use and guidance, and it all comes down to the pre-show preparation. But I think now at shows, it's not about the old saying of, it's in business, it's not, what you know, it's who you know. It's both of those now in exhibitions. The diamonds in the data are the things that we don't know and need to learn about. So who is in the room, and joining those dots together. So it's becoming much more common practice that exhibitors will be expecting to do real business at the show, and not just wait for people to fall onto their stand because they've booked a corner a booth and, you know, there's 2 points of access. It has to be much more strategic than that. Where you know, Umex is the show that I'm working at the moment, and the marketing that they've done is great. It's really, really positive, such as, you know, 245 top leaders and decision makers will be in the room. Well, great, but who are they? Where are they? And how can I meet them? That's what's really important to know. So it's that educational piece and sharing the diamond and the data, sharing that data with your exhibitors so they can actively, you know, take up the leads so that they're already hitting the ground running at the show.
Yeah, and I think there was something you mentioned on a call we had previous to this, Leah, which I thought was really fascinating, which is around, you know, these exhibitors booking meetings before the show's even happened. So when you have these rebooking conversations, they're incredibly easy because the exhibitors that are working hard and know how to, you know, get the most value from these shows are way ahead of all the other exhibitors because they're already setting up meetings before the shows even happened. And maybe, I don't know if you've seen this, where you have a conversation about rebooking and they're like, oh yeah, of course we're going to rebook because we set up this many meetings way before the show even happened. We knew we were going to rebook before we even came to the show.
It's absolutely vital that organisers know that information also, so that you can go armed with that, because I've had instances where, despite it being a really successful show for an exhibitor, they're holding their cards close to their chest and they're like, oh, you know, yeah, it's been okay. Whereas from the organizer, from, you know, coming from a rebook perspective, I have that dashboard of information and I'm able to go, oh, but I've seen that you've had this person, and this person come to your stand. There's no arguing with it. The data is there, and that works really fantastically for the organizer. It's a really strong position.
Yeah, could you tell me a bit about some of those metrics? So you say, you know, the fact that people are coming to your stand, there's probably, you can see what meetings are being booked. You can probably see the quality of the meetings. What are some of the other metrics that you're playing back to these exhibitors? I mean, one of my bosses used to say a big part of anyone's job is selling success back to your bosses. So how are you selling success back to these exhibitors? What metrics are kind of bubbling to the top for you?
Sure, it will be the level of purchasing power and seniority of the people that they're able to meet, and whether, you know, depends which angle they're looking for, whether that's distributors or, you know, it depends which field. But it's also very valuable for using it to suggest to the exhibitor that they either have or haven't put enough effort in. Because if we are providing them with the data, the people are at the show and they are not arranging those meetings, that's pretty telling. So again, the data will only do so much. So I will go armed with the top 5 people in terms of seniority. But it will be then the next step that we often are looking for now is what happens next. So yes, you've met at the show. How would you rank that meeting? And are you meeting again? And what is going to happen after the show?
Perfect. There are some 24-carat insights right there. Denzel, I'm going to move over to you. I see you as the trends guy. You're kind of looking into a 20-year horizon. So I'd love you to kind of have a chat to us a little bit about what are the trends you're seeing. Obviously, you're talking to a lot of these huge organizers, you're advising them, you're consulting them. What are the things they're saying to you, and what are some of the things you're telling them they should be focusing on over the next year, 5 years horizons?
Well, that's a very broad topic, but one of the things that some are worried about is the fact that you've got low growth in attendee numbers. So if you look at the industry as a whole, the industry is growing, so revenues are going up, but square meters aren't really going up. Take out the COVID, because that was just a big bump. But essentially, revenues are going up faster than square meters, and attendee numbers are not going up. So that means you've got a slightly smaller audience globally, slightly fewer square meters. And so the question is, how do you make that work? And so we hear about Money 2020, and I call that a knowledge economy event. And so just getting a massive trade show hall and filling it up with square meters is no longer the way to approach this. What you have to do is I'm in the knowledge economy. I need to target people who have purchasing power. and I need to find the best way to engage with them. So that's the topic of this conversation. But it's not easy. A lot of people are really scratching their heads as to how to do that better. And in order to do that, you then think about the role of the events in the industry. And it may well be that we've got people listening in whose job title is something like, event manager or event director. I would say that maybe some people are being moved towards being a brand manager or a brand director. So you're actually thinking more about the community that you're serving, and you might serve them with some other tools so you have a greater level of engagement. And this trend about reduced attendee numbers, I mean, we've all heard it say, oh, there weren't so many people, but they were better. Trying to measure the quality of the audience is really tough. And there's an example I sometimes give. I was running a roundtable some years back, and I asked, there were, again, 20 CEOs in the room. I said, who's made their event smaller on purpose? And more than half the hands went up and say, no, we actually reduced the number of visitors. And I remember Reed, the leader, said, yeah, we got it a bit wrong. World travel market, we halved the number of visitors. And perhaps we went too far. But the whole idea was get rid of the tire kickers because they were just in the way. Now we should be better at micro-targeting and finding routes to make it less intimidating for a CEO to go through the throng and so on. But fundamentally, it's about getting to the quality. And the trick, we're talking about ROI here, but getting to the really good understanding of who the right visitors are, targeting them and not worrying about the tire kickers is something which a lot of people are trying to figure out how to do, and then how to get better engagement with those really the right people.
It's music to my ears. And the other thing I think a lot of organizers are talking about at the moment, I think you touched on it last time we spoke, Denzel, was around first party data, particularly when it comes to exhibitors, because that's what this webinar is all about. So what are you seeing, and why is first party data in this space so important?
Yeah, first party data in sort of simple words basically means that we're able to communicate with them. We know who they are, and we can communicate with them. I think if you just read the newspapers in the last week, Informa has made a very big investment in this. So it's just worth spending a moment looking at Informa. I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 years ago, they created something called Iris, where they were really taking their data and going through a process of highlighting just the quality data they have at the heart of the organization. And I saw something not so long ago, they're talking about they have 14 million, and they call them Kima data. Now, Informa bought Penton, and when Penton put itself up for sale, the front page of the propaganda said we have 20 million database. And so if they bought Penton and they had 20 million, and they're only talking about 14 million, what does that mean? It means really focusing down on the quality 14 million. And of course, there are many millions in addition. So that was the Iris investment into which they put a lot of effort. Then they bought a business called Industry Dive and spent $500 million on that. Not a lot of people in the trade show industry paid a lot of attention to it. Industry Dive is all about first-party data, so engaging decision makers through newsletters they sign up to. So you then actually know who the person is and what topic they're interested in. And so that was another big play in first-party data. And now they've just bought a business essentially called Tech Target. It's now called New Tech Target, in quite a cleverly structured deal, so it works from a finance point of view. And that means that Informa has just made a massive further play in first-party data, i.e. having a very, very substantial database of people where you really know what they are doing and you can engage with them. So Informa's the world leader, and that's been a history of substantial investment. Now, smaller firms could also invest in first-party data in other ways, but I would say that's a really big trend to look out for.
I mean, wouldn't you also say that, as a smaller scale, not Informa buying Tech Target, but, a lot of events are factories of first-party data. They're generating a lot of data around, who's attending which session, who's registered, who are the VIPs in the room. So it seems to me like maybe not all event organizers are created equal, and some just haven't seized the opportunity or don't have the systems in place yet to really leverage this.
Absolutely. You've given a really good example. So if you have some content, a session on a certain topic, and if you're able to see not only who registers to go to that piece of content, but who actually went to it and who stayed there for the whole half an hour versus walking out after a minute, that's incredibly valuable, because, okay, someone sat listening about left-handed corkscrews for 30 minutes. They're not going to do that because they were bored. They can do it because they're interested. And you've got that ability to develop that understanding through on-site metrics, but not everyone's registration isn't always being captured and used. Attendance at an event, a little seminar or whatever, isn't always being scanned, and so on. So it's difficult for some organizers to join it all up. You can also, I mean, there's a lot of effort into heat mapping or RFID, so where people have been in halls, which booths they've been on. There are a lot of tools which are quite difficult to join up, but we actually do have really the ability to find out a lot about those we engage with on site. We've also got people who pre-reg and don't show. Roughly that's about half of pre-reg don't show. And you should be using really some kind of predictive analytics to figure out on your reg list who's most likely not to show. And you can use some analytics available on a PC to do that. And then you can have a targeted campaign. And if you can swing some of the decision makers from pre-reg no-show to showing, you're going to increase the value and the ROI for your exhibitors. And there I'm just talking about those who registered, but I keep expanding it beyond that to your universe. Who else should be there and is not there? So there's a lot of steps organizers can take to try and just make sure they get the attendees there. And frankly, just doing this for you, Leah, just make your job easier.
Yeah, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I have to say the princess cut diamond for me there is all about demonstrating the ROI with the data in the first place. And that's something we've had a lot of customers tell us at Grip, and that's why we built things like Grip Pulse, and we've also built and launched recently, I think it's session scanning. So you can see which attendees have actually visited which session, how long they were in there for, which is all great data for the exhibitors to find out, because often they have sponsored sessions that come part of their package, and they get to give a talk, and they want to know who is listening to that talk, which is intent data, which is personally, I think, one of the reasons why Informers bought TechTarget. It's all about intent. Who's downloading these reports? Who's signing up for various white papers? TechTarget have all these media properties, and they could tell you at any one time which accounts are surging because they're interested in particular things. Leah, I'm just going to come back to you around, data, which is what we're talking about, around, demonstrating this ROI to exhibitors. Which organizers are doing it really well? Which ones are really in amongst the data? Maybe they're employing data scientists. Maybe they just have a data team. Maybe they just really care and they're using it in a smart way. Because I think, look, we can all have dashboards, but if no one looks at those dashboards, it's pointless. But if we've got really smart organizers who've got the right data in the right dashboards and they're leveraging them to rebook exhibitors, that's where the real value lies. So which organizers are you seeing that are using data in a smart way to rebook exhibitors? And you don't have to name names, but I'm just fascinated to see what's really going out there in the real world right now.
So hopefully people will know that the ICE show and IGB shows that take place at Excel, one coming up. And the lead up to that show is critically important. And the organizer there has a real approach where I've mentioned that onboarding and actually getting the exhibitor to buy in to the fact that they need to be sifting through the data, and as only as good as the data that people are putting in and registering. But there's a whole customer success platform there where people are encouraged to create their portfolios and create basically a map where people can find them leading up to the show again, which allows people when they're there to already hit the ground running and do the business there. It's a kind of a 365 community and workplace approach, that it's not just immediately before the show, at the show, or after the show. It's a place where you can do business, see the latest products and services that are being launched, and a constant touch point of engagement, which is really, really valuable. It's not just at the show, it kind of transcends that, and it's working really, really well.
Awesome, thank you. No, really, really useful. It's nice to hear what's really going on behind the scenes at these shows. One of my advisors used to talk about, seeing the scars on people's backs. They want to go in the room and go, did you go through this as well? So knowing that, there are some tough decisions being made out there by other organisers, event organisers, probably helps a lot of people on this webinar. I would love to just shift gears now in the last few minutes and just talk about the future. Where are we heading with all of this? Where are we going for, exhibitor ROI when it comes to this data-driven element? The diamonds are in the data. What other diamonds should we be uncovering, Denzel? Obviously, we've talked about visitors. That's the most important thing. But what should organisers be focusing on next? I've heard talk of data lakes. I've heard talk of, ensuring you've got quality over quantity. Where do you think things are going in the future, and what should the people on this call really be focusing on, do you think?
Yeah, it slightly depends upon who we have listening. As you mentioned, data lake, that's the plumbing behind the data. And a lot of what we talked about is enabled by having a really good set of systems and processes. And there's been a lot of investments in that. Different organisers have invested to different levels, and it's been quite tough to get it right. If you've grown by acquisition, you will find that you've got very different systems coming in and different data qualities and so on. Or if you've managed to be more homogenous, life is going to be easier. So number one, you have to get the plumbing right, and we know, how tough that is. I think the other thing which is worth thinking about is, I've talked already a little bit about predictive analytics, and using predictive analytics can be extremely powerful with data. I gave the example of really looking at attendees and using predictive analytics to see who's not going to show. You can also, on a large event, use predictive analytics on the exhibitor side as well. But I see that being used, but perhaps not as much as it possibly could be. And the other thing, of course, we are in the year where AI is going to be really used effectively for the first time across businesses. I just published a piece about my view of AI in the events industry, and it's a net positive. It's just worth mentioning that AI is a threat to events to an extent, because if either a visitor or an exhibitor uses AI well, they can actually find what they want and maybe not need to go to an event. So there is that type of threat, but it's not going to be one which is going to sink the industry. That's going to be on the edges, is my argument. You're going to find a lot of back office improvements through AI. Gen AI around words. You can also use AI around data, but that is perhaps not always quite as easy. So I would say that we're seeing a lot of organisers putting aside a budget for AI and investing in opportunities. Some of them around just customer service, essentially chatbot, and others around some of the marketing process. But I think we're going to see AI make an impact across all of industry, and events organisers are in a good position. More back office benefits than product benefits, but there will be both.
And obviously at Brit, we're using AI to ensure the right recommendations are happening and the right meetings are happening. And that probably plays into your kind of future, Leah, for exhibitor ROI and data-driven rebooking, which is if you can make those matches better, and the right meetings are happening, and those are resulting in better business relationships happening at your event, you can showcase and demonstrate ROI to the exhibitors. So my question to you, Leah, is just about the future for you. Where do you see it going for Exhibitor ROI? Do you see more data sources? Do you see your job being automated more? Where do you think we're going to go in the next year to 5 years?
Of course, there are always going to be advancements, and I agree that, you know, AI, for me, it's never going to be able to completely replace the in-person engagement. It just never will. You know, we all suffered and felt a massive gaping hole when we couldn't be in person at events, and we all celebrated with a great big hurrah when we were able to be in the same room again. So I think predictive analytics, yeah, I certainly agree for exhibitors will come into play a lot more. But I think it's going to be making what already exists more effective and more efficient. And, you know, there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of that lead retrieval, you know, even the interactive floor plans taking me there. We've gone a long way from just heat mapping, where, you know, I can use my eyes and see where is busy, but you have to take it to the next level. Where were people and why were they there? And AI matchmaking, I think, is going to be a great thing that will take out a lot of the guesswork, and hosted by meetings, which is, again, where you have the AI component. However, the hosted by meetings make sure that people actively do meet. They're not just saying, yes, okay, let's meet and ticking a box. They're actually going, and it's a managed process, but that's managed by people, not by AI.
And are you out of interest for the hosted by or pre-scheduled meetings? Are you involved in rebooking those sorts of shows where maybe it is a couple of bits of content, but really the whole focus is about the meetings? Do you get involved in those, and are they easier to rebook than standard conferences and trade shows?
Certainly. I mean, I'll hark back to Essentials Money 2020. If you look at their floor plan, everybody is around the edges of this beautifully configured floor plan, which is around the Connections Lounge, named so because that's where most of the business is done, and people want to go and meet, have those meetings that are pre-registered. You know who you're going to meet, you know why you're going to meet them, and then beautiful things happen. So yes, definitely that is part of a huge draw for my exhibitors at the show. And they certainly want to be, you know, stone's throw distance from that Connections Lounge, because once people leave that area, even you capitalize on foot traffic. So it's a win-win situation, getting people to meet and do business.
Yeah, I mean, the meeting part is crucial. I mean, I just think one of my favorite anecdotes about any conference is 2016 Web Summit, where the kind of general thought is that Uber did their first round of investment there because they met the investor at Web Summit. And that was all because this one show connected a bunch of people together. And then what happens later on down the line? For the next 5 years, exhibitors say, I want to exhibit there. If that happened, I'm going to go there. And so this kind of myth, which is grounded in reality, self-perpetuates, and then you get the snowball effect and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And even, you know, that particular anecdote is an ROI point that can help rebook exhibitors, and you don't even have to do anything to do it, because it's just the narrative that goes with the show. Anyway, we are at the top of the hour. We've got 2 minutes left. Denzel, how can people find out about you if they want to continue this conversation with you offline and have a chat?
I'm always happy to speak to people about any topic. So I guess through LinkedIn is an easy way. And so I'm with Stacks. I'm also on the advisory board of some event organizers. So I do some things outside of the Stacks consulting in that as well. But I'm always just happy to answer questions and chat to people just like this.
Brilliant. Well, you've been a mine of information today. And Leah, how about you? How can people find out about you and Rego and what you guys do?
Same, absolutely. LinkedIn and on our Rego website for more about our products, services, and solutions. And I will certainly be reaching out to Denzel, because I think there's a lot of input you can have in how I do what I do and how Rego rebooks. So yeah, pleasure to meet you.
It's all
That's
about
been a lot of fun.
All about the insights. Well, thank you very much for your time and the sprinkling of diamonds that you've got on this webinar. All that's left for me to say is we have the next webinar, which will go live tomorrow. That's going to be 21st of February. That's right, we're doing one every month. It's all about registration. It's called Join the Registration Revolution, Smart Strategies to Reduce Your Registration Workload. So we're going to be hosting that with some fantastic guests, which include Adam Miller from Visit by GES. We've got a couple of really great organisers coming on for that one too. So watch out for that one in your inboxes. And all that's left for me to say is thank you very much to Denzel and Leah. You've been sparkling as ever. And we'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.